Welcome to Wednesday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live here on Giants.com, YouTube, as well as the mobile app. He's Matt Citak. I'm Lance Medow with you for the next 60 minutes. It is presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Giants. Multiple ways you can interact with us here on the program. You give us a ring, 201-939-4513. You can also use hashtag Giants Chat on social media. You can follow and interact with the two of us. He's at Matt Citak, one word. I'm at Lance Medow, one word, last name Medow. And we appreciate you joining us here on the Giants Podcast Studio, presented by Hackensack Meridian Health. Keep getting better. So we've got some news on the defensive line front that we're going to address first. Then ESPN just laid out their latest power rankings in the wake of the draft, and it's interesting where they have all the NFC East teams and where they think they improve the most from a specific position. So Matt, let's delve into the newsworthy items off the top. And this was just announced maybe an hour or two after yesterday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live. But the Giants have agreed to terms with veteran defensive tackle DJ Reader. His name had been floated around for several weeks, and there were even reports that the Giants had him in for a visit. So this is not necessarily a name that came out of nowhere. But here is now another addition to the group of veterans that they are compiling to try to make up and fill the void left behind by Dexter Lawrence, whether it's a Shelby Harris or a Leki Fotu, and now you've got DJ Reader. Reader was a name, Matt, that I threw out going back to the beginning of free agency. I thought he'd be an ideal fit to complement Dexter Lawrence, because at that point we didn't know Dex was going to be traded, but 6'3", 330, entering his 11th season, but I would argue still playing at a high level. He actually had a career-high 3 sacks 2 years ago. Not that they're bringing him in to get to the quarterback. It's about stuffing the run and plugging the holes, but this is going to be a bullpen by committee, to me, philosophy, and they're going to have these guys compete in camp, but I look at Reader as the front runner to help solidify at least more snaps than anybody else to replace Dexter Lawrence.
Yeah, well, for starters, just want to clarify, it's still according to reports.
Correct, that's why I agreed to terms.
Pending a physical.
It's not
so just,
official.
Just
sure.
want to throw that out there, but assuming all goes well with the physical and it does become official, yeah, I think DJ Reader is going to be the most likely guy to, no one's going to replace Dexter Lawrence, obviously, in that production, but he's going to take the most snaps at the nose tackle position of all these guys that the Giants have now brought in. He is a nose tackle. He's going to fill that role. As you mentioned, he's not quite the pass rusher as Dexter Lawrence. He's able to get to the quarterback to some degree. It's not like he's a zero in that department. I mean, each of the last 2 years, he had 20 total pressures, and that was coming off of the year before where he had 34 pressures. Like, he can get after the quarterback, but the biggest thing that you mentioned, the biggest thing he's going to do is he's going to clog the running lanes. He's a big guy. He's going to clog the lanes. You know, he's going to get the double teams like Dexter Lawrence did. Obviously, Dexter Lawrence, again, in the pass rushing department, the last couple of years, shown a lot more than DJ Reader has. But DJ Reader has gotten double teamed, I think, last year almost just as much as Dexter Lawrence. So he's going to be that guy, the big guy in the middle that's going to get attention from those interior offensive linemen and hopefully set the edge rushers up for at least some one-on-one situations. Now, again, I don't think DJ Reader in 2026 is going to get quite as many double teams as Dexter Lawrence probably in 2026, but he's still going to demand a lot of attention. And, you know, considering the situation that played out with Dexter Lawrence the last couple of weeks, I mean, obviously he got traded a month into free agency. So all the top guys that you maybe would have been interested in the second week of March, they're all obviously gone, long gone, signed for a lot of money. So I think all things considered, where the Giants stood, you know, with Dexter Lawrence clearly just not wanting to be here and not being willing to be a part of this team, want to help build this thing up with this new regime, that I think the Giants did pretty well bringing in DJ Reader, Shelby Harris, Leki Fotu, not to mention they got the 10th pick, which turned into Francis Mauigoa, which should help Jackson Dart, the protection, the whole offense. And even with all of those additions, that is still less money towards the salary cap than just an unhappy Dexter Lawrence would have counted towards the salary cap. So while it, you know, no doubt about it, it wasn't the most ideal of circumstances to start, I think the Giants, the front office, did a great job pivoting and making the best out of a not ideal situation in order to help this team both in 2026 and beyond.
And as you noted, one player in particular was not going to replace Dexter Lawrence, but I think they've made significant strides by bringing in players that are known for stopping the run. You want to talk about, Matt, an identity, and the Giants, they didn't need a reminder. All they had to do was look at the film and look at the stats from last season, and that's a big reason why they addressed the linebacking position, but they knew they wanted to improve immensely in the trenches, which is what you were getting at. And I think they did that because Harris and Reeder are big guys. They play physical. But what you were just tapping into, this is why the Reeder move, I think, was important, maybe more so than any other transaction they made. And that is that Dexter was so good at drawing attention. Whether it was the fear of the opposition thinking he's going to plug a hole or just collapsing the pocket and getting to the quarterback. And prior to DJ Reeder, I think they had a nice collection of players. But I don't think they had somebody that when you put the personnel on the board in the opposing rooms as they're preparing for the Giants, they said, you know what? This guy's going to damage the game, Matt. This is a guy we really have to worry about. And once again, I am not comparing Reeder to Dexter Lawrence because there is a huge separation in terms of Dex's sack production over the course of his career. But Reeder does still have an MO as I'm going to get inside, I'm going to disrupt, I'm going to stop the run, and as you were hitting on, I'm going to hopefully help the edge rushers get some favorable matchups. That all he can accomplish. Yep. And that's why I really think this move puts them further ahead in the process of aiding the competition on the interior, but also giving the opposition somebody to think about.
No doubt about it. I mean, it was only a couple of years ago that DJ Reeder was playing at a very, very high level. Again,
with the Bengals, yeah.
Maybe not quite to the level that, we saw Dexter Lawrence in that 3-year stretch where he was, second team All-Pro, Pro Bowl every year, but not too far below that is the level that DJ Reeder was playing. Now, he's a little bit older than Dexter Lawrence, but yeah, look, the biggest thing that he can do that to help this team in 2026 is help stop the run, which is something he has done well his entire career, and draw the attention, get those double teams to help clear things up for those edge rushers. I mean, I've spoken many times on the show the last few months about how I think Abdul Carter is set up to have a breakout campaign. Well, when the Giants got rid of Dexter Lawrence, I'm not saying that my confidence in that, decreased, but it took a little bit of a hit because I was like, well, who's going to get the attention in the middle of the defense? Sure. Now DJ Reeder is here. I think it's the best possible pivot the Giants could have gone to after the Dexter Lawrence trade. And another aspect of this that I think not too many people are talking about quite to the level that they should be is that this kind of paves the way for Darius Alexander to get more playing time and to sort of take that next step in his development. Because as I was talking about earlier in the week with Paul, he showed a lot of promise in that last chunk of the season. He was pretty quiet for most of the year, but that last 5 or 6 game stretch, it seemed like something clicked in his head and he was really starting to get going and be a lot more productive than the first, 2/3 of the season. So if he can build on that and really take a step in his growth, he's going to get a lot more playing time. It's going to help his growth and development, and it's going to give the Giants also more confidence in the long-term solution and answer at the defensive tackle position. Obviously, DJ Reeder reportedly agreed to a 2-year deal, but the other free agents that the Giants brought in last week, and Shelby Harris and Lecky Fotu, they were both reportedly signed to 1-year deals. So right now, those guys are obviously not on the roster in 2027. It's just Darius Alexander and DJ Reeder right now under contract for next year. So if he can take that big jump and big step, it would just give the Giants so much confidence going into next offseason that, all right, we don't have to scramble to fill out this defensive tackle position. We're pretty good right now with DJ Reeder and Darius Alexander as our top 2 guys.
Well, and also it's good for him to learn from Reeder and Harris.
For sure.
Before, to your point, maybe he takes on a more prominent role in a year when they don't have some of these veteran free agents that they've just added. Now, the reason why, just to piggyback off your point, Alexander's production went up, he played more towards the latter part of the season. I mean, those are the facts. If you look at it by game, defensive snaps went up. I mean, even the percentage, for example, and I know this was a game that didn't mean anything for either team, but he played 80% of the snaps against the Dallas Cowboys in the finale. So that added up to 44 snaps, which was more than anything else he had played. The highest prior to that was 37 that he played against the Lions in that overtime affair. And you started to see the tackles for loss. You started to see just the combined tackles. He had 2 quarterback hits against the Raiders. He also happened to have 2 against the Lions. So I'm with you. I don't think, though, the Reader signing it, I'm not saying this is what you were hitting on. I think this was more of the removal of Dexter Lawrence opens up the door for Darius Alexander. Whether they bring in another veteran, whether Reader was here or not, Alexander was going to get an opportunity to certainly prove himself.
Yes.
But you can't rely on just Alexander on an island, because even though he showed some flashes, Matt, still raw and young, and I think you wanted a little bit more proven talent, especially when you're talking about shoring up, stopping the run, and aiding some of these young pass rushers. I mean, Abdul Carter is only entering year number 2 in the NFL too. So I think the Giants are taking that all into consideration, that yes, on the roster they have some guys who have upside and perhaps a high ceiling, but you're not banking on that based on a sample size of 5 or 6 games.
Oh, no doubt about it. I mean, that's why following the trade of Dexter Lawrence, you went out and signed 3 veterans that have played in the NFL for years now and shown that they can compete and succeed at this level. It's because you don't want to go into week 1 having to, lean on Darius Alexander, having to play, 40, 50 snaps. You don't want to have that happen. Obviously, the hope is at some point during the season, he proves that he has taken such a big step that you can't keep him off the field, and you need to put him on the field for a good number of snaps. But that's something that he's definitely going to have to earn as as training camp gets started, and then preseason, and once the games actually start in September. That's something he's going to have to earn, that bigger role that he sort of had towards the end of last season, now that all of these veterans are in the mix.
And I also don't think the Giants wanted to just lay out the red carpet and hand it to him. That's the benefit of bringing in the veterans. Even if you like the potential of Alexander, you're still saying, okay, go out and beat out Reader, beat out Harris, beat out Fotu, and so forth. One other minor addition that the Giants made to the defensive line, they claimed Zach Pickens off of waivers from the Kansas City Chiefs. He was mainly on their practice squad a year ago. He was called up late in the season, wound up playing in 3 games, a 3rd-round pick of the Bears in 2023. So he spent his first 2 years with Chicago, last year with Kansas City. Another individual, a little bit younger, of course, Matt, than Harris and Reader, but this is what we're talking about. At this point, when you have a 90-man roster, there's no limitation. If you want to bring in 18 different defensive linemen, bring them in. It doesn't hurt you. Plus, you also have Bobby Jamison-Travis, who they drafted in the 6th round. So we just went through, that's 6 players. Not to mention, and I know Sam Roberts may be more of an edge defensive end, but they brought him in from the Atlanta Falcons. So there's going to be a lot of competition. And remember, they also have, and this maybe gets lost in the weeds, they have some edges that can move inside. For example, Chauncey Golston is a versatile player, and he's another one to look out for this year. Unfortunately, he dealt with injuries last season, but he was one of the players that I pinpointed coming into the season as a bit of an X factor because of what he did with the Dallas Cowboys. It didn't necessarily come together because unfortunately he couldn't stay on the field, but you talked about Alexander having an opportunity. Don't sleep on and don't overlook how they may tap into and utilize Golston, who you can use on the outside and the inside as somebody that is another proven veteran in the mix.
Yeah, Paul and I spoke about Chauncey Golston earlier in the week, and that he's now healthy, which obviously last year he was dealing with some injuries, but it was just 2 seasons ago in Dallas. He was coming off the best season of his career, where he was an actual force on that Cowboys defensive line. Last year, the injuries, along with honestly, just it seemed like the coaching staff did not know where to where was the best place to put him on the defensive line, and all of that combined for him to just not have the best of seasons. But I still, going into last season, I thought he was going to be one of the most underrated signings that the Giants had all of last offseason. Underrated additions overall. So I still think there's a lot of potential there for him to grow into more of a role on this defense. And just about Pickens, obviously, the when you claim someone off waivers, you shouldn't have the highest of expectations for anyone. But again, he's getting thrown into this competition in the defensive tackle group where there's, guys are going to have to earn their spots, earn their reps, earn their snaps. He's got an opportunity here. This is a guy that was just a third-round pick a couple of years ago. Incredibly athletic. He is a very athletic defensive tackle. And
he's got length 6'4", 303.
Yeah, he's a big guy. He can move. Like, he ran a 4.89 40. That's not easy for a defensive tackle to do. So he's obviously got a lot to prove because he's been in the league for 3 seasons, and as you mentioned, hasn't had a whole lot of production, but he's going to get an opportunity here to show that he, deserves to play in the NFL and deserves to have a role on a defense. So let's see what he can do.
One other thing I wanted to hit on before we open it up to the phone lines and social media, ESPN just released rankings, and I have been on the record, I'm not a huge fan of rankings, but I do think it's sometimes effective to utilize them, at least as a talking point, to bring a different perspective to the show. So these are their NFL Power Rankings for 2026 under the theme of which teams improve this offseason now that the draft is over. So we're only interested in the Giants and the 3 other teams in the division. So just to give you an idea, they have the Eagles at 5. Then the next team in the NFC East is the Dallas Cowboys at 16. Then they have the Commanders at 19, and they have the Giants at 23. So, Matt, let's start with the Giants. They said the most improved position for this team is linebacker, based on what they did in the offseason. I just want to read the blurb here. The Giants spent $13 million this offseason to sign linebacker Tremaine Edmonds and use the number 5 pick on Ohio State's Arvell Reese, who will play weak side linebacker. So they're hoping the unit is significantly improved from last season's, which began with Bobby Okereke as the middle linebacker and Micah McFadden alongside him. McFadden also re-signed with the Giants after missing most of last season because of a foot injury. Between Edmonds, Reese, and McFadden, the inside linebacker group should be an asset as New York tries to solve its run-stuffing woes. Giants allowed a league-worst 5.3 yards per rush last season, the worst mark in franchise history, which we were hitting on earlier in the program. And I would agree, linebacker is certainly a position that they addressed. They brought in some length. They brought in veteran experience. They brought in athleticism. But here's the key. Yes, that position has improved on paper, but it's how that unit cooperates with the guys we were just talking about, Matt, up front. That is how you improve your run stopping. I still think they need stops at the first layer. They can't expect the linebackers and then, of course, the safeties and the secondary to clean it up because that was happening way too much last season.
100%. I mean, these guys up front obviously are the first line of defense. They need to, not every snap, but a lot of the time get into the backfield, push the offensive line back a little bit. Yeah. But the biggest thing, with this ESPN most improved position being the linebackers, I don't think any of us would disagree with that. I mean, between Tremaine Edmonds and Arvell Reese, the Giants have probably their most athletic pair of linebackers and long linebackers in God knows how many years. But the biggest thing about it is with this athleticism comes great speed. And last year, the Giants obviously had a very bad run defense. Of course, the yards per carry average was at the bottom of the NFL. But if you look at the splits, a lot of the damage was done on runs to the outside, which as much as, you want your defensive line, your defensive tackles to help with the run, if it's an outside run, I don't know how much you can really expect those guys to really do.
Sure.
You need the linebackers to go be able to run sideline to sideline. And Tremaine Edmonds and Arvell Reese have shown they are very capable of doing that. That is some of their strengths. So even, with this, before the trade of Dexter Lawrence and even after, did not matter. Those guys are going to be the biggest reasons why the Giants' run defense takes a step up this year because of those two. And even I'll throw Micah McFadden in because he obviously re-signed. He played about a quarter and a half last year before suffering a season-ending injury. And this was coming off 2 seasons where he looked like he was on the incline and getting better each season. We didn't really get to see at all what he could do. So I think the group of those 3 linebackers are going to be the biggest reason why this Giants run defense improves in 2026.
And you also have Darius Muisow, too, as insurance with McFadden. So you know all of these guys are not going to play all 17 games. So you're going to need the McFadden's, you're going to need the Muasaus of the world, but sideline to sideline, that's the aspect probably where the linebacking core has improved the most. It's the ability to go, okay, not north and south, east to west, and the recovery to aid to what you were hitting on, the secondary players, because when you're running to the outside, you're also looking to attack or test and challenge the cornerbacks to see whether or not they're interested in tackling. And we know, and I'm not pinpointing anybody on this roster, I'm just saying as a general sense in the NFL, there are corners that are press guys, they like to cover, they like to tangle with the wide receivers. And there are guys that want no business of getting down and dirty and aiding the run. So that's another reason why teams also look to run to the outside. Yeah, they want to get some favorable matchups, open space for their skill position players, but they also want to see, is the corner willing to come up and be physical? So how do you offset that? How do you help that? You have linebackers that could cover a lot of territory, and they could do that relatively quickly. So I'm with you. That also is maybe a further layer of what ESPN is talking about with respect to the linebacker position. All right, let's just give a quick idea of where they feel the rest of the NFC East improve, because this is going to be something the Giants are going to have to tackle at least twice in the upcoming season. So I mentioned the Eagles, number 5. They feel they improved at the tight end position. They like what Philly did to complement Dallas Goedert, who they wound up re-signing. They drafted Eli Stowers out of Vanderbilt, very athletic player, in the second round. And then they brought in 2 veteran players, not guys that are going to put up monster numbers, but can help in blocking and further the cause, in Johnny Munt and Stone Smart. And Smart was with the Jets last season. Prior to that, he was with the Chargers. The other element, it's interesting, we were just talking, Matt, about the linebackers and length. All of these tight ends are tall guys. They're 6'3", 6'4", and bigger, and they can pose a big challenge for the secondary. So that's another reason, and this ties in actually beautifully to the Giants improving the linebacking position, because who knows what type of matchups we're going to see, especially when you get into the middle of the field in the secondary. Well, the Giants are going to have to slow down. At least Dallas Goedert and Eli Stowers, I could tell you, are going to be running routes for the Eagles this upcoming season.
Yeah, I mean, viewers of the show that have heard me on the show for the last few months know how much I love Eli
So I set this up beautifully for you, is what you're saying.
I know how devastated I was, the fact that he ended up in Philly. But
the alma mater.
In terms of the Philadelphia offense, I think that was a perfect match for them. It gives them an incredibly athletic tight end and another big target in the passing game, because it obviously looks like A.J. Brown will eventually get traded. It does not seem like he's going to be playing for the Eagles this upcoming season. So having Eli Stowers there with Dallas Goedert just gives Jalen Hurts and the whole passing game 2 very big receiving options in the passing game, because you look at the other receivers that they have in the passing game. I mean, Devontae Smith is not big. Hollywood Brown is not big. Elijah Moore.
And Mekhi Lemon's not a big guy, too.
Mekhi Lemon, who they drafted, not big. So when you have receivers that obviously are on the smaller end of the spectrum, under 6 feet, I think all of them. Devontae Smith maybe is 6 feet, but obviously
borderline. Yeah, he plays a lot bigger, in fairness to his size.
He's great.
But yes, stature-wise,
they don't have any big guys. So to have those 2 tight ends that are very capable pass catchers and big targets, obviously is going to help that Eagles passing game.
Cowboys they have at 16, and they think they most improved at the safety position. And John and I did a show last week where we were talking about teams that improved overall through the drafted free agency, and I brought up, of course, the addition of Caleb Downs. That goes without saying, but they brought in Jalen Thompson from the Arizona Cardinals and P.J. Locke from the Denver Broncos. And you look at it against, they had Malik Hooker and Donovan Wilson last season. Now, Hooker is still on the team. Wilson is unsigned, but you brought in, I think, some better athleticism, better ability to stop the run and cover, which were major headaches for them, and also giving them a little bit more depth at that position. And the Giants had the same philosophy in terms of coming in to this offseason, Matt, you're looking around at the rest of the division. You just went through the Eagles receiving corps. Well, I mean, we didn't talk about Dallas's 2 star wide receivers in C.D. Lamb and George Pickens. And then you look at what Washington has to offer with Terry McLaurin and plenty of other, I would say, complementary weapons. And watch out for Luke McCaffrey this season. I think he is set up for a potential breakout campaign. You need corners, but you also need safeties that are going to help. And maybe you're going to bring one of your safeties down into the slot. So Dallas knew they had to help their run, but I think also they helped their cause in terms of coverage on the back end to compete against the rest of the NFC East, and then, of course, the other teams they're facing this season.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, these safeties, a lot of the time, also get matched up in coverage against tight ends.
Yeah.
So we talked about the 2 Eagles tight ends. Well, the Giants have Isaiah Likely and Theo Johnson. And the Commanders, lost
Commanders,
Zach.
they made a number of changes. Yeah, well, remember, Zach Ertz got hurt at the tail end of the season. Yeah. He unfortunately had that gruesome foot injury. So they brought in Okonkwo, okay, from the Titans. And then they have a few guys that they've had as complementary weapons, too, still in the mix. Yeah, but they'll mix and match in terms of their offense.
Those are 5, between the 3 opponents for the Cowboys in the NFC East, 5 tight ends that you're going to have to match up in coverage against. You know, the Giants, obviously, we've spoken about. Giants are going to play a lot of 2 tight end sets this year. And again, given the Eagles' trade or soon-to-be trade of A.J. Brown, they're probably going to play a lot of 2 tight end sets as well.
Well, Eli Stowers and Goddard,
Yeah, Eli Stowers is more than capable of lining up out wide as a wide receiver or in the slot. So, yeah, these safeties on the Cowboys are going to have a lot of big targets to cover up. And, you know, obviously, that's why the drafting of Caleb Downs made the most sense for them, because even with the signing of Jalen Thompson, they still needed more
without a doubt
in that secondary. And obviously, once you got out of the top 10 of the draft, no doubt about it, Caleb Downs was the best player still left.
They needed a Swiss Army knife in that safety position, and that's what they get in Downs. And it also relates to, I can't recall which interview, but John Harbaugh did an interview this offseason, and one of the things that he emphasized, he says, the priority, and I'm paraphrasing, so don't hold me to every word, but the main point was you need to bring in personnel to beat your division rivals. Your whole team should not be framed around that, but there needs to be at least an emphasis. And I think the common theme for not just the Giants, but for the other teams is, okay, what did our foes do, and what can we do to help offset and neutralize that? Now, the last team, the Commanders, come in at 19. They believe they improved the most at the edge position. Dorrance Armstrong tore his ACL in Week 7 last season, and then you could argue ever since that happened, the pass rush was not the same. So they did sort of what the Giants are doing up front on the defensive line to make up for Dexter Lawrence, bringing a few guys, but Odafe Owe had a massive season with the Chargers. He's a former Raven. And then Kayvon Chason actually had 7.5 sacks for the Patriots, so he did a nice job. They drafted Joshua Josephs in the 5th round, and then Charles Omenihu, who was with the Chiefs, I think is a player that has not gotten enough credit over the course of his career because they've had some bigger names up front for KC. But between those 3 veterans that I mentioned, I think the Commanders have a lot more firepower to dangle out there and in much better position, God forbid, if they suffer an injury.
Yeah, I mean, I was very high on Dorrance Armstrong going into last season.
He had another great season with the Cowboys, similar to what we were talking about with some of these other players, like related to the Giants.
Yeah, for sure. I think he was one of the more overlooked players going into last season. Obviously, coming back from a torn ACL, although it happened earlier in the season, so the way
you never know, though.
Injuries work now, I would think he has a decent chance of being ready towards the start of the season, but nonetheless, yeah, they now have, not only do they have talent on the edge, but as you mentioned, they have depth. And it's not just pure depth pieces. They have guys that would be starting, the 3 top guys would be starting on a lot of teams around the NFL. It's somewhere on the defensive line. So, yeah, they did a very good job of addressing one of their needs. They don't have that, superstar edge rusher, but they have now 3 very solid to good guys that are going to man the edges. And good thing that the Giants were able to re-sign Jermaine Illuminor and have a healthy Andrew Thomas coming back, because that's obviously going to be a tough group to match up against the 2 times the Giants play them.
All right, a few reminders before we open up the phone lines. You've got the 2026 Town Hall presented by Verizon. It's live from the Beacon Theater in New York City, Monday, May 18th. You can get an exclusive preview of the season with GM Joe Shane and head coach John Harbaugh. Plus, you can hear from current players like Jackson Dart, Cam Scatteraboo, and Brian Burns, along with members of the newest draft class. You can secure your seats now. You go to giants.com/townhall. That's giants.com/townhall. As we are here on Wednesday's edition of BBKL, it's presented by Cadillac. He's Matt Citak. I'm Lance Medow. Thanks so much for spending part of your afternoon with us as we are broadcasting from the Giants podcast studio, presented by Hackensack Meridian Health. Keep getting better. All right, let's open up the phone lines as we move forward. Sure.
Just
yes.
A non-Giants or even football update.
Wow.
Because we are in the New York market. The Knicks play tonight. Joel Embiid just got ruled out.
Really? Wow. Okay. See, I've been so
76ers.
in the football mindset that I was not paying attention.
I just saw that Shams tweet pop up, and I know a lot of you listening are probably big Knicks fans, so had to quick mention.
Well, listen.
I know you were not. That was
but
more for the viewers.
That's fine. Well, I'm a basketball fan, though. I'm very much invested in every single series, not just one in particular from my national work. But Embiid, see, now you're going to get me in a basketball mode, Matt, so you're guilty of this. But real quick, there's always a wild card when Joel Embiid is involved in a series because he comes with the caveat of you never know if he's going to hold up. And he was banged up coming in. He had the appendectomy, and he got pretty beat up in Game 1 against the Knicks as New York ran away with things. So I can't say this is a surprising development, but this is what happens when you're Philadelphia and you're relying on a player that can't even be penciled into the lineup consistently.
Yeah, look, I'm not a Knicks fan either. You guys all know that. I'm unfortunately a Nets fan, but never pains me to see a Philly team take a shot. So.
The Jersey-Philadelphia line and the geography that comes into play with all of that. All right, so we gave you a basketball update. We updated you on the transactions for the Giants. Anything else that you want to squeeze in, Matt, before we open things up?
No.
Smooth sailing. Okay, I just wanted to make sure we got the seal of approval. Let's check in with Scott in New Mexico with us here on BBKL. What's happening, Scott?
Hi, guys. One thing before I get to my main points, one thing that rankles me a little bit is we always think about big receivers being better than smaller receivers, and that's simply not the case. And taking your example on Philadelphia with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, Devontae Smith had more yardage, not by much, than A.J. Brown did, and only one less reception. So I don't think it matters. Look at Wan'Dale Robinson, small receiver, and look what he was able to accomplish. So I don't think size is really the issue. And I kind of got the impression that maybe sometimes we look at big receivers as being better, and that's simply not the case. So
I would agree with you, Scott. I think usage is a big part of it, and every team is going to tap into the potential of a player differently. And as I mentioned earlier, I said Devontae Smith, I think, plays much bigger than his size. I don't think he gets credit for his toughness. He's been actually very durable since he came into the NFL. And I remember even having conversations with Paul on the show in his draft class, the concern about him holding up. And I think he's quieted his skeptics in that department very effectively. Right. But I do think there is value in having size if you're going to run certain plays up the sideline where you're going to need to beat a taller corner or you're going to want to have some leverage on a linebacker. So I'm with you. I think your overall premise is right, that you shouldn't get too caught up in bringing in a 6'4" guy for the sake of being 6'4". He has to have the talent to back it up. But you do need some mixture because of the length you're going to see on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I don't think you need to be a skyscraper just to be a good receiver in the NFL, obviously. I mean, Malik Neighbors had a historic rookie season, and he's, listed at 6 feet? Jamar Chase is one of the best receivers in the NFL, listed at 6 feet. So you don't necessarily need to be the huge, tall guy. It just, obviously, when you're a defense trying to match up against an opposing offense, a lot of the time, those bigger guys are just a little bit of a tougher matchup, just in terms on paper, because if you're a 5'10" corner, it's going to be a little bit harder to match up against a 6'4" wide receiver.
Can't teach size, as they say.
Well, in the Giants' heyday was Odell Beckham Jr., who wasn't that big. There was nobody who could cover him.
That's true. For sure.
I just think it's just the way we look at things. But that was the only thing that bothered me a little bit about the conversation. But I want to get to my main points. Matt, I agree with you in regards to the linebacking core. And in regards to DJ Reader, I think that was one of the wisest moves the Giants made. I looked at his, which surprised me, I looked at his double team win rate, and he led the NFL in that, which means he's occupying two different linemen. And to me, if that happens and they get some consistency with the line, that'll open up channels for the linebackers to blitz. And that was very impressive. His rate against the run wasn't as good, which I was surprised at. But if he can occupy two guys, I think that's going to create some havoc for opposition teams with the linebackers we have. And I agree that those were important issues. The thing also I wanted to talk about was another player that could be a sort of a diamond in the rough, and that's Jack Kelly from Brigham Young. I know they have him earmarked to play special teams, but if he works himself into the lineup with McFadden and Alvaro Reese and Tremaine Edmonds, does that mirror sort of the kind of team that they had back in '86 when they had Reasons and Carlson and LT and Carl Banks? It almost looks like a duplication of something like that if they have playing a 3-4 defense. And does that allow more blitzing opportunities for the linebackers they have? I know they're going to be geared against the run, but even run-stopping blitzes can help. So I was wanting to get your opinions on whether if Jack Kelly can make it onto this team and they have four outstanding linebackers, will the Giants mirror what they did in '86 so far as the way they play their defense, understanding that they have to obviously take care of the outside to make sure the runs don't go outside, as you pointed out, Matt. So I wanted to get your opinions on that, and I'll take your answer.
All right, Scott. Yep. Appreciate the phone call.
Scott.
Well, first of all, I don't think they're sacrificing and taking any personnel off the field to get Jack Kelly in the mix. Let me say that first. I don't think it's a stretch for him to make the team. I think he was very productive in college at a few programs, but you also need to take into consideration the caliber of the competition he was going up against. And actually, he was somewhat similar to McFadden, where he was a pretty big sack guy in college. But once again, that was who he went up against, and that was how he was utilized. I think he is textbook special teamer because I think he's a hustle guy. I think he's scrappy, and I think they'll love him in that facet, at least for year one. But, man, I'm not so sure that he's going to break through in terms of some of these other linebackers, or they're going to take some of the other edge rushers off the field. I think year one, special teams is probably where he's going to make the biggest name for himself, if anything.
Yeah, I don't remember if it was yesterday or Monday, but I literally just said exactly what you just said with Jack Kelly, that as a rookie in 2026, he's looking at primarily a special teams role. But I did say it wouldn't surprise me if he can work his way at some point during the season, if he excels in special teams and shows, like maybe during the preseason and training camp, that he's able to handle some defensive snaps, then I wouldn't be surprised if he carves out some sort of small role on the defense. But look, it's not going to be I'd be surprised, should say, if it is a every down or even close to an every down role, because as we mentioned, there's Tremaine Edmonds and Arvell Reese are starting, and barring injury, they are going to be on the field close to 100% of the snaps. And whenever they need to come off the field, Micah McFadden's going to be the next one up.
Yeah.
Darius Muasau will be after McFadden. Jack Kelly just has a lot of competition in front of him in order to carve out an legitimate actual role on the defense. I think that's something he could grow into over the course of his, let's say, his rookie contract. Those 3-4 years that he's here, I think that's something he can grow into because, again, Micah McFadden was brought back on a 1-year deal. Darius Muasau has either 1 or 2 years left, but, was drafted not too far from where Jack Kelly was drafted. So if you told me going into next year, after showing a lot of promise and potential flashes throughout this year, going into 2027, that Jack Kelly was sort of earmarked as the team's 3rd or 4th linebacker while also keeping that big special teams role, I would say that is totally reasonable. But in terms of this season, again, he could surprise us. He could come out on summer with his hair on fire, which obviously he's capable of doing, and prove that he deserves to have some sort of role on defense. But really, I think in 2026, we're going to see him primarily on special teams. And just very quickly, I don't think it's fair to compare any defense to the Giants' defense of 1986 with the legends that were on that squad. Not saying you're putting those expectations on the 2026 Giants, but that group was on another level. So I don't think it's fair to compare anyone to those group of guys.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about arguably the greatest pass rusher of all time in Lawrence Taylor, Carl Banks, Gary Reasons, Harry Carson. I mean, that's a legendary group. I don't think anybody on this current roster has entered that territory. The only thing I will say is there is versatility. There's the ability to play a number of guys if you want to go there for comparison's sake. But again, I don't see them, which to me was the center of the point, taking one of their edge rushers, because if you want to talk about four linebackers, we're going to include the Brian Burnses of the world and the Abdul Carters of the world off the field so you could get Jack Kelly some snaps. So I guess that's what I keep circling back to, and I'm with you. I think McFadden is the first man up if Reese or Edmonds get banged up. And remember, Muasau, the only reason why he played a lot more was because McFadden got hurt. Yep. Okay? If McFadden doesn't get hurt, I don't know whether or not Muasau even scratches the surface. So, yes, I don't have a crystal ball. Neither do you, Matt. Can never predict injuries. I always say this on the show. So, if, God forbid, they get to the point where they've got to play the third linebacker, of course, Kelly in all likelihood could get opportunities. But in a more reasonable world where everybody at least stays healthy, it's going to be very hard for him, to me, to make an indent. And I think any defensive coordinator and defensive coach will tell you, unless he, once again, is just blowing them away in practice and outperforming the elites, they're not removing Burns and Carter and company in pass rushing situations for a Jack Kelly, unless they want to give him some more opportunities from the interior and see whether or not he could get some penetration and maybe spell Reese or Edmonds. But once again, that still would be a very small group of snaps, I would argue, Matt, over the course of the season.
Yeah, and look, just very small, like, we're talking about last year we went into the season saying, how are the Giants going to find snaps for Brian Burns, Abdul Carter, and Kayvon Thibodeau? Well, guess what? They have the same situation this year. All three guys are back. So I don't think they're going to be looking for find opportunities to get those guys off the field more. I think it's going to be more about getting those three guys on the field together more often. So even more of a way to say that it's going to, look, I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's going to be an uphill battle for Jack Kelly to earn a big role on the defense in 2026. It's not impossible, but it's for sure an uphill battle.
Just out of curiosity, I wanted to glance at the snap count breakdown from a year ago, just to further emphasize what you were talking about. And remember, it's a different coaching staff and different dynamics, so you can't match everything. But Burns played 77% of the snaps. Carter played 76% of the snaps. And then Muasau, once again, McFadden was hurt, so he got 41%, which to me I think was much higher than they had anticipated. And Kayvon Thibodeau, but remember, he was banged up, so I don't even know if that number is worth throwing out, was at 44%. So I think the main takeaway from a year ago is Burns at 77, Carter at 76. Minimum, you want to get them both back to that number.
Yeah.
As the foundation.
100%. I do think some of that, maybe at least towards the end of the season, was because Kayvon was hurt. Kayvon missed, what was it, he played 10 games. I believe he missed the last 7 games of the season.
Yep.
So that probably led to those other two maybe playing a little bit more on a weekly basis. But yeah, you want your two best edge rushers on the field 70+% of each and every week that they're healthy. 100% without a doubt.
All right, let's head back to the phone lines as we move forward here on BBKL. We got John in Cape Cod. Welcome aboard, John. What do you got for us?
Hi, good afternoon, Matt, Lance. You know, one thing is consistent with your show. No matter which pair of guys are on, it's always good.
Well, appreciate you tuning in.
Thank you.
Well, I'm speaking the truth after being a Giants fan for over 60 years. But I'll tell you something. My view right now is that the media gets too caught up in the semantics. By that, what I mean is the best players on defense are the guys that fit into a situational football mold. the thing that Bill Belichick brought to the top of the crest with defenses. One thing that hasn't changed is over the years, the linebacker has been the most versatile, athletic guy on the field. Very simply because he has to be a run stopper and he has to be able to be a pass defender. I think we get caught up in whether we're playing a 4-3 or a 3-4 defense. I think what they're playing today is a combination of both, depending on the situation. Over the years, it's always been the defense evolving based on the offense and what the offense is doing. Tom Landry invented the 4-3 because he wanted big linemen to keep offensive linemen off the giant linebackers. You go to the 86 Giants, who were the best Giants team I think I've ever seen, and they had 4 big, fast linebackers that could be run stoppers as well as pass defenders. Everybody thinks of Lawrence Taylor as a pass rusher, and he was certainly the best ever. But you can see clips of him in single coverage against guys like Jerry Rice, and you can watch what he did on running plays where he made the most unbelievable plays down the line that I've ever seen in all the years I've been watching football.
Well, and he had that pick six against the Lions, which is an extremely notable play, too. Yeah.
Well, how about the one you want to see? You want to see the play that I think is the most athletic play I've ever seen by a linebacker. Watch the clip of Taylor against, I think it was Mays, with the New Orleans Saints, where Taylor goes down the line on the inside, and he's playing at 245. He catches a 195-pound running back before he hits the line of scrimmage, which means he's covering about 7 yards faster than that guy's covering 4. But it wasn't just him. You know, in addition to the 4 starters, those Giants had Andy Hedden and Byron Hunt, who were both, in fact, Byron Hunt was the fastest of all linebackers on the whole team. And these guys were all 230 plus. John Madden called Brad Van Pelt one of the best run-stopping linebackers he ever saw. And Van Pelt was 235. I mean, he was a converted safety from college.
Sure. In fairness, it was a different game back in 1986 too.
Oh,
so that's the other thing you got to take into consideration.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The game evolves.
Sure.
The human beings evolve. All these guys, every decade in pro football, you can watch the evolution of the athlete because they get bigger and faster.
Absolutely.
And the players have to match that. I think the Giants have added tremendous depth with especially what they've done in the past couple of weeks to filling Dexter Lawrence's place. They're now going to be basically playing defensive tackle or nose tackle by committee. But they have guys that can play many different roles, whether you want to call them an edge rusher, an outside linebacker, an inside linebacker. They're all fast. The difference sometimes is a little bit of speed because of extra size and being extra thick to be able to stop the run.
Well, and that's what you want with a roster, John. And listen, we'll let you go on that note. Appreciate the phone call. You want to know that you're protected from injury in terms of if, God forbid, you lose a pass rusher or you lose an interior linebacker, you're not looking around and wondering, boy, who do we plug in? So it goes back to, Matt, what we were talking about earlier when I brought up Chauncey Golston. And don't forget the fact that he could be moved inside and outside. And Reese, I'm sure when we finish talking about his career, okay, he's not just going to be an inside guy. They're going to find ways to tap into his various skill sets and where he can line up. And the versatility goes even well beyond that in terms of we could sit here and talk about guys on offense and defense, but when you talk about the linebacking position, the athleticism, the length, the ability to line up on the edge, the ability to help on the interior at least also maybe better protects them from injury compared to what they experienced over the previous seasons.
Yeah, I'm glad you actually brought up Arvell Reese because I don't think this has quite been talked about enough. If you look at his career at Ohio State, it really wasn't until this past season that he truly broke out and became the star that he was, the All-American linebacker. And that was because Matt Patricia came to Columbus. And, obviously you can say all you want about his time in the NFL, Matt Patricia, but he was great for Ohio State this past year. And the biggest thing that I think that led, and this is coming from Dan Salamone upstairs, who eats, breathes, and sleeps Ohio State football.
Does he ever?
Is that Matt Patricia figured out the best way to use Arvell Reese, and that is by using him as like a chess piece all over the place. And I'm not saying that in like a way that he doesn't have a defined role, because he did have a role for Arvell Reese, but I think the Giants and Denard Wilson are going to use Arvell Reese in a similar way. Like, yes, he will start next to Tremaine Edmonds at that middle linebacker spot, but they're going to move him around all over the defense. He showed that he's capable of rushing the quarterback. He can line up at the edge if you need him to. He can play all over. So that is going to be a great way for Denard Wilson to keep opposing offenses on their toes and not really know what to expect. I think I spoke about this last week, that Denard Wilson is going to be sending blitzes from just all over the place and keeping the opposing offensive lines guessing of where is that extra blitzer going to be coming from. Arvell Reese is going to play a very big part in that because he can line up just about anywhere in the front seven. And I think we're going to see that pretty early on.
Well, that's what everybody was talking about leading into the draft, that he is so athletic, you have to have a specific game plan. And I do think the Giants have that. I think Harbaugh and company goes back to what he was talking about when he sat Malik Neighbors down and explained this is how we're going to utilize him. So I do see what you're talking about, Matt. I'd be very interested how early, though, in the season we see some of that stuff, because I think you also need to walk the fine line of, are you overwhelming the player as he's getting settled in to a new defense? So I could see that down the road.
Yeah.
I just don't know how quickly we're going to get into that.
That's totally fair. You don't want to put too much on a rookie's plate week one, so that's fair. But I don't think it's going to be too long into the season where we're going to see that versatility really put on the spotlight.
Let's head back to the phone line. Scott is in Portland joining us here on BBKL. What's happening, Scott?
Hi, thanks for taking my call. Yeah,
Sure.
I'm real happy about the Reader situation. I think now that that's happened, we have our plan A established as far as the roster being in good shape to produce our starters, and I think our plan A is in good shape. So I want to talk about the contingency plans, the backup plans. And I would say, I don't know if you agree with this, but I would say that on our offense, our best player, our best established player is Andrew Thomas. As far as when I say established player, I mean somebody who's played a couple dozen NFL games and established a level of play. I would say Andrew Thomas is our best offensive player, and so I'm thinking of what's the contingency plan for if Andrew Thomas gets injured, as probably our most important contingency plan that we have. And so if he were to go down in training camp or whatever, I would say, I'm just spitballing here, I would say that a contingency plan to consider would be to move Jermaine Illuminar to left tackle, move CeCe Mauno to right tackle, and sign Greg Van Roten off the street from free agency. And so I wanted to throw that out there as a contingency plan.
Well, Scott, I don't mean to interrupt you. Let me just clarify that. Are you saying that in the event Andrew Thomas goes down and Greg Van Roten is not on the team, you would make those changes and bring Van Roten in off the street, if I understood that correctly? Is that the scenario?
Yeah, I'm just saying. I'm saying what's the backup plan? What's the backup contingency plan if Andrew Thomas goes down, let's say in training camp? What would you do? And that's what I'm saying. That's what I would do. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
I mean, I disagree with you.
Or if you thought there was a better plan and why you thought it'd be better, I just wanted to see what your thoughts are, because I think that's our most important backup plan we need to figure out. So I want to hear your thoughts on that.
And I would agree with you 100%, Scott, and it's a very good question, and I think it will further the dialogue here on the show, so we certainly appreciate it. We've had, in passing, some different conversations because, Matt, I've always brought up, and I know John and I have maybe disagreed a little bit in terms of the swing tackle being solidified. Right now, I think Marcus Bowe certainly has a position to be in the driver's seat, but to say that it's locked down, I don't know if I'd go so far, because once again, we are talking about an individual that was drafted in the 5th round in 2025 and also is now working with a new offensive line coach and a new coaching staff. And whenever those changes come in, I don't just assume that how a player was utilized a year ago is going to roll over. But at least based on common sense, let me answer the last caller's question, the hypothetical first. And I'm curious your perspective too. The reason why I disagree with what he threw out is you're moving too many offensive linemen around. You're actually hurting yourself more than helping yourself, because under his hypothetical, first of all, you're signing a guy off the street. And I know Van Roden was here last year, but once again, he will have not known the offense. He will have to learn a whole new regime in terms of coaching staff. So you can't take that for granted. Then you're moving Illuminor, who, yes, has played different positions in his career, but he's been on the right side recently. Now you're moving him to the complete opposite side, which any veteran offensive lineman will tell you the footwork is the complete opposite. So now you have to reprogram yourself to do that, and you're then taking a rookie who you're trying to get comfortable at a new position at guard after he played tackle in college and now kicking him back out. So you're changing 3 different positions, Matt. To me, that's got nightmare written all over it. I want to make it less of a game of musical chairs. And the way, to me, that you do that is you see whether or not you have a practical guy that could just slide in at left tackle. And we've seen Bo has had experience at left tackle already. Okay, we at least have ample evidence of that. I don't know, once again, what the new coaching staff thinks of him, because we haven't really seen much of anything at this stage. So there's not a lot of tangible evidence. But as it stands right now, May 6th, okay, 1:28 p.m. Eastern. I'm being specific here, so I hope you got the pen and pads at home. I would say the most sensible backup plan to answer your question, if God forbid Andrew Thomas goes down, is simply to move Marcus Bowe into left tackle, and that is one change you're making as opposed to 3 or 4, which to me is way too overwhelming, especially with a rookie involved.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, I think that is by far and away the easiest and most logical thing that you would do. You just have Marcus Bowe come in, and obviously from Andrew Thomas to Marcus Bowe, there's a step down. There's no doubt about it. Andrew Thomas,
and there's going to be a step down, no matter how you spin it.
Unless you have another All-Pro as your swing tackle. Then,
what a luxury.
Obviously, stepping down from Andrew Thomas, it's going to be a downgrade no matter what. But there are things that you could do to help Marcus Bowe if he were to have to step in for Andrew Thomas at left tackle. Have a tight end lined up next to him more snaps than not. Give him help. Have, Pat Ricard in the backfield giving him help on passing plays, whatever it might be. That is 100% what you would rather do than switch, as you mentioned, Lance, switch Jermaine Illuminor from right tackle to left tackle, because all of these offensive linemen would tell you it's one thing to move from, guard to tackle or tackle to guard if you're staying on the same side, because the footwork stays the same. It's just obviously there are changes, but when you go from a left side to the right side, you're switching everything up. And that is where it takes a little bit more of an acclimation that obviously if something were to happen, they're not going to have time to get all these guys acclimated at different positions. And as you mentioned, Maui Noah, you're coming in, and John Harbaugh has said he's going to be our right guard. Let him focus on right guard. He's going to be a rookie. He's going to have enough on his plate trying to get a hold of an NFL playbook, the speed of the NFL, going up against NFL pass rushers. You don't want to also then have him worrying about a position change. I mean, offensive linemen will tell you the biggest thing is having consistency. That is the biggest thing on an offensive line. The reason why the line has had success last year was because for most of the season, it was pretty consistent. The same group of guys out there. There wasn't a whole lot of big changes. Obviously some guys missed a little bit of time, but it wasn't big changes made to the line week in and week out. So I'm with you. If you could just put Marcus Bowe in, keep everyone else the same, and let the other 4, grow and get comfortable in their respective positions, that's 100% what you want to do. I mean, I guess if it's the very beginning of training camp and God forbid it's a season-ending injury for Andrew Thomas, then, maybe you think about more drastic alternatives. But I mean, if it's Andrew Thomas, or even whoever it might be, missing a couple of games, you don't want to throw a wrench in the growth and development of the whole offensive line by switching 3 different guys in new positions just for a temporary fix.
And here's the other part that I want to add, which is also why I would be against that. Francis Mauigoa, who you just drafted in the first round, even if you said, well, move Illuminor to left tackle because you think he's your best option to anchor the left side and the blind side of Jackson Dart. Well, even if you kept Mauigoa at right guard, okay, let's not kick him out, Matt. Let's go with a different hypothetical. You're now still telling him to get used to a new right tackle, which I don't love because, to your point, I think one of the worst things you could do for a rookie offensive lineman is have him play various positions, number one, but number two, play next to different offensive linemen. And sometimes you can't control that due to injury, but you can control that in this scenario because you're talking about an injury to the left side. You're not talking about an injury. If Illuminor went down, okay, you got no choice. He's got to play next to a new right tackle. But if Illuminor is healthy, then I would much rather turn to a different option on the left side so that you're keeping the right side stable.
Yeah, and it's not, I don't think it's only just not wanting to switch the guy next to Francis Mauigoa, but again, if you're moving Jermaine Illuminor from the right side to the left side and then just having someone else step in at right tackle, that guy is obviously going to be a step down from Jermaine Illuminor. There's a reason why Jermaine Illuminor signed for the amount of money that he did this offseason, got the multi-year deal to be a starting right tackle. Whoever you fill in, whether it's, even if it's just putting Marcus Bowen, again, that's a step down. And when you have a rookie right guard, you want him to have the best players around him possible because that's obviously going to help his growth and development as a rookie. So you want him to be playing next to Jermaine Illuminor for all 17 games. You don't want to switch that and then have someone who's not quite as good as Jermaine Illuminor filling in because that could potentially hurt Francis Mauigoa's development as well.
Let's get to a few social media comments before we wrap up shop in terms of some of the topics that we've been talking about. Here's a comment from MB Goblin. Competition makes everyone better. We now have competition at defensive tackle, cornerback, wide receiver, and offensive line. That was certainly a theme that Matt and I hit on over the course of the show. Let's go to, boy, this is a mouthful. I don't even know if I'm going to attempt to pronounce it. I'll just say 3134 at the tail end of the name. Having Edmonds as a linebacker and experience, we should be okay. It's the cornerback and safeties now that perhaps they have to look at as an area to function and get together. But he does say that he has faith in Drew Phillips in terms of the inside and what he could provide. Well, we know the outside cornerback competition is going to be one to watch come camp. You know, who's going to win it? Is it going to be a veteran? Is it going to be a rookie? Remember, they brought in some new blood. So you look at who they have. You got Greg Newsome, who you brought in from the Jaguars. You just drafted Colton Hood, and then Paulson Adebo. How is he going to handle Deontay Banks? So, I mean, that's 4 guys right there for 2 outside spots. That is going to be, of all the positions, that is one to watch in terms of maybe the stiffest competition in training camp as we really get ahead of ourselves in terms of an early preview. And then one other comment that I wanted to touch on, going back to what we were talking about with respect to circling back to the defensive line. And Goblin again, DJ Reader isn't going to replace Dex, but that room now is better rotation-wise and will be competitive. And we were, once again, hinting at that. You're not going to replace Dexter Lawrence, and no individual, no group is going to replace Dexter Lawrence because it goes back to, Matt, what we had emphasized off the top. First of all, none of them have the pass rushing ability as Dexter Lawrence, okay? That's the big separator. But number 2, and I know you were talking about DJ Reader did draw double teams, but I guarantee you, if I talk to any offensive line coach or offensive coordinator in the NFL, and I say, this week you're going to have to worry about Dexter Lawrence, this week I'm taking Dex out of the lineup, you just got to worry about DJ Reader. You're going to tell me there's not a difference in terms of the approach and the game plan?
Oh, for sure.
That is all you need to know from that standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, look, we have both said it multiple times. There's a reason why Dexter Lawrence is considered to be one of the top interior defensive linemen in the NFL. The way he's played, throwing out last season, the 3 previous seasons, he showed that he is either the best or right up there with, Chris Jones, Quinnen Williams, not quite on the level of where Aaron Donald was, but in that tier nonetheless. He is phenomenal. There's no doubt about it. But one thing that, the trade of Dexter Lawrence did do is, if Dexter Lawrence was still on this team, like, obviously the top of the depth chart at defensive tackle would be better. No doubt about it. But the 3 guys that the Giants just signed the last week, not all 3 would be here. They would not have the cap space to make that work. Maybe one of them would be here. Maybe. But I don't know if it would be DJ Reader with the reported numbers that he agreed to. I don't know if the Giants would have been able to afford that if Dexter Lawrence is here. Now, again, I'm not saying that the group of 3 is better than having Dexter Lawrence here, but it definitely gives the Giants better depth at an area that was considered to be probably the team's Achilles heel, the biggest weakness, the interior of the defensive line. So while the top of the depth chart took a hit, we'll see DJ Reader has shown flashes of being a very good defensive tackle, and the depth below him is a lot better now, and it's because they were able to clear the cap space of Dexter Lawrence. If he was still here, Dex, obviously the pass rushing ability would still be there, but the depth behind him would be significantly worse.
Given the circumstances of when they traded Dexter Lawrence, who was still available, to say you walk away with 2 established veterans in DJ Reader and Shelby Harris is not a bad position to be in, because you could be in more of a youth movement where you're really playing the guessing game and you have Darius Alexander next to a rookie and you're hoping for the best. So that at least helps them immensely that they have 2 guys that have a track record in that department in terms of stopping the run and battling different offensive linemen.
Yeah, and again, you have to just remember that it's not just the defensive line that got affected with the Dexter trade, because they added the 10th pick in which they took Maui Noah and greatly improved the offensive line. So
it's a give and take.
So while the defensive line, I will say, even with these additions, took a bit of a hit getting rid of Dexter Lawrence. Of course, he's a top-tier talent. You were able to fill it with a couple of reliable, consistent veterans and also help your offensive line, which, let's not forget, Jackson Dart is going to be the biggest key to this team's success this year. If he can take a step and be, that year 2 jump that we see some quarterbacks have made these last couple of years, then the Giants could be an, actual fighting for the playoffs. It can be a legitimate contender. And what better way to help him take that step than having a big mauler at that right guard position that can hopefully grow and be the anchor of this offensive line for the next decade plus.
It's very similar to when you parted ways with Odell Beckham. You got various pieces, and you just need to see how those pan out. So it's evaluating Dexter Lawrence versus a rookie right guard and veteran defensive lineman. And how do those things offset one another
plus cap
moving
space.
forward? Plus cap space, too, as well. A lot of different dynamics in play. All right, that is going to wrap up Wednesday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live. We appreciate everybody tuning in. It's presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the Giants, coming to you from the Giants podcast studio, presented by Hackensack Meridian Health. Keep getting better. The show, which is part of the Giants platforms everywhere, the Giants YouTube channel and Giants.com/podcast. And the archive of this show and our entire podcast network is on the Giants mobile app, podcast platforms everywhere, and Giants.com/podcast. So you should not have trouble finding it, because just about everywhere you turn, you can certainly click on the right atmosphere and the right menu to get you to the program. Good conversation, Matt, as always. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. For Matt Citak, I'm Lance Medow, signing off on the latest edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live. We'll be up and running again Thursday, 12:30 p.m. Eastern. Stay locked to Giants.com for all the latest. Have a good one.